a secret handshake, an unexpected meeting, and a decision that could redefine African diplomacy for a generation. Namibia's incoming president, Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, landed in South Africa. Not for celebration, not for ceremony, but for strategy. Behind closed doors in Pretoria, she met with President Cyril Ramaphosa. What they discussed is more than political courtesy. It's continental chess, the kind of move that makes foreign powers nervous. So what just happened between Namibia and South Africa? And why now? Let's break it down. This wasn't just a handshake, it was a statement. An African woman, a liberation fighter, a diplomat, and now head of state, standing shoulder to shoulder with one of Africa's most influential leaders. And it happened in the heart of Southern Africa, at a time when the region is more divided, more pressured, and more watched than ever. For context, this is Nandi-Ndaitwah's first major diplomatic engagement since securing Namibia's top office. And she didn't go to Europe. She didn't go to the UN. She went straight to Pretoria. That tells you everything. This visit wasn't symbolic, it was surgical. Namibia and South Africa share more than just borders. They share blood, history, pain. Both countries were shaped by colonial violence, white minority rule, and brutal liberation struggles. They were comrades in arms when apartheid divided Southern Africa. Now, decades later, they're reuniting at a different kind of battlefield: economics, security, and sovereignty. The headlines say, bilateral talks. But beneath that lies the real story. Namibia wants to redefine its place in the African order. And Ramaphosa? He's looking for reliable allies as South Africa faces economic instability, energy crises, and a shifting global stage. Together, they're plotting something bigger, a new foundation of cooperation built not on foreign aid, but on African initiative. So what exactly did they talk about? Sources indicate the agenda touched on regional energy integration, security partnerships amid rising insurgencies, infrastructure development for cross-border trade, and a joint stance on resource management, but more importantly, mutual respect and strategic independence. Let's zoom in on the players. Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah is not just another African leader. She's the product of resistance. Born under South African occupation, she joined SWAPO and lived in exile during Namibia's liberation war. She studied diplomacy, fought colonialism, and returned home to help rebuild her country. She served as foreign minister, deputy prime minister, and now, president. Her leadership style is calm, calculated, and Pan-African. But don't be fooled. Behind her quiet voice is a razor-sharp mind. She understands geopolitics, and she understands that Africa's next era will not be built by waiting on the West. Meanwhile, Cyril Ramaphosa is juggling crises, load shedding, corruption scandals, political factions threatening his presidency. But despite the pressure, he remains a central figure in African diplomacy and a key voice within BRICS. For him, welcoming Nandi-Ndaitwah was more than protocol. It was an opportunity to realign South Africa with a rising class of African reformers, leaders who are young, bold, and unafraid to push back against outdated power structures. Together, they're setting the tone for the region. Let's talk economics. Namibia is sitting on a quiet revolution. New offshore oil discoveries have the potential to transform its economy. But here's the catch. Who gets the contracts? Who builds the refineries? Who sets the terms? Nandi-Ndaitwah has made it clear. Namibia will not be another case of resources out, profits gone. She wants local ownership, regional processing, continental trade. Enter South Africa with its refineries, ports, capital, and experience. Together, they could create an energy corridor stretching from Namibia's coast to South Africa's industrial centers, bypassing foreign control and building internal resilience. This is the kind of strategic thinking that has global investors watching closely, and some foreign governments quietly sweating. Then there's security. The southern African region is under strain. Islamist insurgents destabilize Mozambique. Foreign military contractors creep into fragile states. Drug and arms smuggling spill across borders. Namibia and South Africa both understand that sovereignty means nothing without safety. Talks of deeper military coordination are not off the table. Imagine joint border patrols, shared intelligence systems, and coordinated responses to regional threats. It may sound ambitious, but it's necessary, and it's already being discussed. So what's the bigger picture? This meeting is not just bilateral. It's a signal to the African Union, to ECOWAS, to the BRICS community, and yes, to the United States, the EU, and China. Namibia and South Africa are saying, we will chart our own path. We will cooperate, but not capitulate. This is the kind of assertive, unshakable African diplomacy that shifts global perceptions. Gone are the days of begging bowls and dependency narratives. This is the era of balance. Let's talk history. During the apartheid era, Namibia was effectively South Africa's colony. It was administered by the apartheid government, with brutal suppression of black Namibians. The two countries were once locked in a master-servant relationship enforced by force. Today, the dynamic is evolving. Namibia is not seeking permission, it's offering partnership. That evolution, from subjugation to sovereignty, is one of the most powerful subtexts of this visit. It shows how liberation, when sustained by leadership, leads to dignity. And that dignity was on full display in Pretoria. Now let's widen the lens. Why is this moment different from the dozens of African state visits we've seen before? Because this one isn't performative. There was no giant Western press machine hyping it, no overscripted podium speeches, no flashy aid packages attached. It was quiet, it was focused, it was real. This is diplomacy 2.0. African-led, African-prioritized, African-paced. And it's setting a precedent. The implications are enormous. If Namibia and South Africa formalize new energy corridors, they could unlock intra-African trade that finally gives teeth to the African Continental Free Trade Area. If they align on foreign policy, particularly in relation to BRICS, they could challenge the dominance of Western institutions in African development. And if they invest in digital, education, and infrastructure links, they could inspire a wave of South-South cooperation that leaves colonial dependency in the dust. This isn't speculation, it's strategy, and it's already moving. So, where does it go from here? In the coming months, watch for new joint economic commissions, public-private cross-border investments, announcements tied to Namibia's oil strategy, and possible multilateral security coordination under the SADC banner. But also, listen to what's not being said. The silence from Western media, the absence of flashy headlines, the global discomfort when Africans solve African problems without foreign middlemen. That silence speaks volumes. What's happening here is not just political, it's psychological, it's cultural, it's spiritual. It's the quiet reawakening of continental confidence. A new generation of leaders is emerging. Leaders who don't ask for permission. Leaders who shake hands to build, not beg. And Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah is one of them. For African youth watching from Nairobi, Accra, Dakar, and Addis, this is what leadership looks like. Not a puppet, not a dictator, not a celebrity, but a grounded, strategic, experienced African who understands the battlefield and chooses collaboration over conflict. That's the model, that's the message, and that's why this moment matters. So what should the world learn from this? That Africa is not fractured, it's focused. That African women are not just symbols, they're stateswomen. And that Southern Africa is not quiet, it's calculating. This meeting was not an event, it was an inflection point. And it's only the beginning. President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah walked into South Africa as a head of state. She left as a regional force. President Ramaphosa saw that, and he responded not with dominance, but with respect. That alone is a revolution. The next time these two meet, it might not be for bilateral talks. It might be to announce a united Southern African bloc, an economic compact, a defense framework, a continental declaration, and the world will watch, not because it was invited, but because it can no longer ignore what Africa is becoming. So stay tuned, because history didn't just happen. It's happening now, right here, right in front of us, and it's African. To fully understand the weight of this moment, we must revisit the roots of Namibia and South Africa's intertwined political evolution. In 1990, when Namibia finally gained its independence from South Africa, it marked not just the end of colonial rule, but the beginning of a new regional order in southern Africa. While the scars of apartheid and occupation ran deep, there was a shared understanding between the two nations. Sovereignty must be protected through unity. The ANC and SWAPO, both former liberation movements, maintained a quiet bond that often played out in regional forums like SADC. But that relationship was often passive, based on shared memory, not active collaboration. Now it appears both nations are reviving that partnership with fresh purpose and modern priorities. President Nandi-Ndaitwah understands that her mandate is not just to govern Namibia, it's to reposition it. Her visit to South Africa is as much about reintroducing Namibia to the region as it is about negotiating bilateral gains. And Ramaphosa, grappling with waning public trust at home, needs more than speeches. He needs wins. Tangible, visionary wins that show South Africa still commands regional respect. Together, these two leaders are quietly drafting a blueprint for post-colonial African diplomacy, a diplomacy that centers African needs first, builds coalitions without begging, and crafts partnerships rooted in equity, not dependency. One key theme discussed, insiders reveal, is climate resilience. Southern Africa is battling prolonged droughts, unpredictable rainfall, and pressure on food systems. By jointly investing in water infrastructure, solar corridors, and climate-adaptive agriculture, Namibia and South Africa could lead the continent in climate-forward planning. This, too, challenges the traditional role of outside donors and Western environmental NGOs. Africa isn't waiting to be rescued from climate collapse. It's engineering its own survival. Another rising theme is digital sovereignty. Both countries are exploring frameworks for protecting African data, building local internet infrastructure, and resisting external surveillance partnerships that undermine national security. Ramaphosa's government has already expressed interest in launching regional digital IDs and smart border systems, something Namibia could plug into through pilot programs. Meanwhile, behind all of this are the continent's youth. Over 60% of Africa's population is under 25. They are more digitally connected, politically aware, and economically frustrated than any generation before them. For them, the visit between these two leaders isn't just a headline, it's a test. Will the leaders build economies that create jobs beyond extractive industries? Will they invest in higher education, innovation hubs, and entrepreneurship? Or will they simply repeat the same alliances repackaged in Pan-African slogans? That's the tension, and also the opportunity. If Nandi-Ndaitwah and Ramaphosa can move from symbolic handshakes to actionable joint ventures, like student exchange programs, regional innovation funds, or youth job pacts, they could ignite a new era of regional integration led by the young. Now let's talk about the world beyond Africa. This meeting has not gone unnoticed in foreign capitals. Policy think tanks in Brussels, Washington, and Beijing are quietly analyzing the significance of this alignment. The West, especially, has long relied on South Africa as a balancing force, a gatekeeper of sorts. But if South Africa begins pivoting toward deeper continental alliances, ones that don't rely on Western approval, it could reshape everything from IMF deal flows to how raw materials like lithium and cobalt are priced and sold. Namibia's emergence into oil and gas production further complicates global markets. If Namibia chooses to refine its oil locally and export through African ports under African-owned logistics chains, it could challenge European energy interests already struggling to adapt after Russia's decoupling. And if South Africa supports that strategy, that's more than solidarity, it's strategy. In short, what happened in Pretoria is not just about two flags and a photo op. It's about who gets to write the next chapter of African history, Africans or outsiders. To truly understand the scale, consider this. If Namibia and South Africa coordinate on just three key areas, energy, defense, and infrastructure, they could build a regional spine strong enough to attract Angola, Botswana, Mozambique, and Zambia into tighter long-term compacts. Imagine a southern African power bloc with its own trade routes, its own fiber optic backbone, and shared continental positions at the UN and BRICS. That's not fantasy, that's strategy. And it begins with trust, which is why this first meeting is so important. Trust doesn't appear in speeches, it appears in decisions, in the private agreements that shape public futures, in the willingness to break with legacy frameworks and build from the ground up. And it's also a gender story. Nandi-Ndaitwah is not just a new president. She's the first woman in Namibia's highest office. Her ascent breaks a patriarchal ceiling that has long confined African politics to male elites. Her meeting with Ramaphosa therefore symbolizes something deeper, not just statecraft, but cultural shift, a rebalance of voice and vision. If she succeeds in governing with both firmness and inclusion, she could set a precedent not just for Southern Africa, but for all of Africa's female political leaders in waiting. And that, too, is part of the stakes. Will this new chapter be remembered as a turning point for diplomacy, youth, sovereignty, and gender equity? Or will it fade, like so many declarations before it? That answer depends on what happens next. Because meetings end, cameras turn off, statements are archived, but strategy, real strategy, begins the moment the headlines stop. If you are an African watching this from anywhere in the world, know this. This is not just a Namibian moment. It's not just a South African one. It's continental. It's the kind of moment that tells the world, Africa is not fractured. It's focused, and it's ready. The only question is, are you watching closely? And now, a final word. This moment, this meeting, will be remembered not for its headlines, but for its groundwork. Because behind every great shift in history is a moment that seemed small, almost invisible, until the ripple effects changed everything. This could be one of those moments. So to every African watching, organizing, building, and believing, keep your eyes open. Keep your expectations high. Keep your leaders accountable. Because the story of Africa's next chapter is not being written in boardrooms in Europe or foreign embassies in capital cities. It's being written right here, by us, for us. And in the years to come, people may look back at this handshake and realize it was never just a meeting. It was the start of a movement,